Hi everybody. In this video we're going to be covering Giuoco Piano. So Giuoco Piano is when white plays the Italian and then black replies with a bishop c5. So if you move the bishop to c5, there are many ways that white can continue this. They can actually bring the knight to c3, for example. This is going to be the four knights game. But they can also try to play c3. So if they play c3, the best move for black is to develop the knight. You don't want to be left behind in the development. You can also play d6. This is also a fine move too, but again, we are going to be not developing a piece, so it is important to develop some pieces. Knight f6 is the best move. Now, in this position, there are actually two main options for white. They can try to attack the center. This variation is actually what we call the center attack, as the name suggests. Or they can actually play the pianissimo with pawn d3. So if they push the pawn to d3, this is the Giuoco Piano pianissimo variation. But today, I specifically want to go over an attack that white wants to do. So after white gets control of the center, looks like white has a big advantage, but this is actually equal. We're going to move the bishop on c5. This is very important. You don't want to move the bishop somewhere like b6, because after bishop goes to b6, white is actually able to advance the center pawns. If white pushes a pawn to e5, this knight has to go somewhere. And like if they do bring the knight somewhere like g8, this is going to be a terrible mistake for black, because white can actually try to do some attacks. But in this position, if black wants to play correctly, what we want to do is we want to move the bishop to b4. We're going to be doing a check to the white king. Now, of course, white has to get out of the check. They can get out of the check with like bishop d2. They can move the knight to d2. They can move the f knight to d2. And they can move knight to c3. The main idea in this position is to move the bishop to d2. This is the most solid line that white can play. But if white moves the knight to c3. This is what we call the Greco's attack. This is full of surprises, but if you know your way out of this, it is very playable for black. Like, you don't actually lose anything. If they move knight to c3, we have two options. We can capture this pawn with the knight, or we can capture the opponent's knight with the bishop. So this is the main line. You can capture the pawn with the knight, but you can also capture the bishop. Capture the knight with the bishop. They'll capture you back, and in this position we can actually capture the pawn. If we do this, and like they try to pin the knight to the king, this is not a very good move for white, because we can't attack the center, protect the knight, and attack the bishop at the same time. So black is a very nice position after pawn d5. So the best move for white is to actually push the pawn to d5, kicking this knight away. We can bring it to e7. And now, this is where things get interesting, because if they do attack the knight, and then like if the knight comes back, the bishop can actually go to g5. Now, you might be thinking, oh, I can just capture this pawn. Well, that's actually going to be a blunder, because this knight is pinned. It's actually pinned from two different ways. It's a cross pin, and since the queen is pinning it to the king, it's an absolute pin. So even though the e7 knight is protecting this knight, that's free to take. So if the bishop goes to here, in this position, you can do a castle. You can push the pawn to d6. Probably pushing the pawn to d6 is more manageable, because if we do... I mean, castling is also fine too. If you castle, they capture. You have to capture back with this g-pawn, opening the king's front. But in the next turn, you do want to bring the knight and try to close this. Again, this is super tricky, but right now black is up a pawn. It is playable. There's nothing wrong in this position. The other way that this position can go is that, for example, if the knight goes to f6 again, and let's say they bring the bishop to g5, what we can do is we can actually push the pawn to d6. By pushing the pawn to d6, we are cutting off the opponent's pawn movement to d6. Now, if they want, they can capture this, and then we can capture back. And again, like, white actually destroyed black's pawn structure. Black is up a pawn. But there's no instantaneous attacks happening right now. We are safe. Alright, so this is one of the lines that can happen. And not very I mean, it's not bad, but it's not easy to play as black. So instead of capturing this knight, what we can do is we can capture this pawn. Now if you capture that pawn, the knight is pinned, so they can't take our knight. What white usually does is they want to castle, because they want to bring the rook in the future. They want to pin the knight, and this is very important. If in this position black makes a blunder and captures this knight with this knight, white is actually going to be very happy by playing bishop a3. By moving the bishop to a3, they're cutting the king, so the king can't castle anymore. And if black is greedy and they capture this rook, white can bring the rook to e1. King can't go anywhere. We can block with the knight. But like after the bishop takes, queen takes, rook takes, and then queen captures on a1, white is in a better position. White has a queen and a knight for 2 rooks. So this is manageable for white. And because both of the rooks haven't moved, the bishop hasn't moved, white can actually make an easy attack. Very playable, easily playable for white. Alright, so how to actually play this properly. In this position, as we said, we don't want to take it with the knight. Instead, you want to take it with the bishop. If the opponent does take you, this move is very important. You have to do it right away. You should push the pawn to d5 to stop the opponent from advancing their pawn. After that move, we're attacking the opponent's bishop. Our knight is safe. We are a pawn up as black, so we're winning. If bishop goes to here, you can actually do a castle, and we're good to go. Now, if in this position, if in this position we do take it with the bishop, there's another tricky attack that white can do. I think they call this the Greco Moeller attack. What white can do is they can push the pawn to d5. If pawn goes to d5, our bishop is under attack, our knight is under attack, but we're up a piece. But everything is like in the middle, very open for the opponent to attack. I think the best idea is bishop f6. You can move the bishop to f6. This would be very, very good. You can also move the knight to something like e5, but it's just better to move the bishop to f6. Now after bishop f6, if they pin this knight is also under attack, so what we can do is we can bring this knight to e7. They can take this, and after they take it, we can castle, and we're good to go. Black is still up a pawn. Knight will get out, push the pawn, push the bishop. We're going to be good. If they capture this knight, and they have to because they're down a piece, so after they do that, you can also push the pawn to d6. Again, preventing the opponent from moving down, and next we want to castle. Bishop is going to get out. We're good to go again. Yeah, it's full of tricks and traps, but if you know how to navigate through this, you're going to be safe. Probably like one of the benefits of playing a tricky opening like this as white and sacrificing a pawn is that if the opponent doesn't know how to play this, especially in lower time control games like Blitz or like Bullet, you can probably win the game easily as white. But after watching this and reviewing it a few times, we shouldn't lose the game as black in the opening after this. Yeah, so if we do bring the bishop, and then like they take this knight instead of bringing the rook, what we can do is we can capture with the b pawn. It is important to capture with the b pawn because like if they actually bring the rook to pin this guy, what you can do is you can castle. The reason why it looks like our knight is hanging, it is hanging, but now there is actually this fork. After we do this fork, they cannot pin the pawn because the bishop can take it. They have to move the rook back, and then we can take it. Now, as black, we're actually up 2 pawns. This is really advantageous for black. But the main problem is that all our pawns are on the same file. So we actually have a triple pawn structure. They can trade queens, we take back. We do have the bishop pair, that's also advantageous. We just want to protect our pawns. If you can't trade them with the opponent's other pawns, get some pass pawns. We can turn this into an advantage as black. So there's nothing that we have to be afraid of when the opponent's playing the Greco's attack. A lot of club level players play this. So if you do take it with the knight and then they castle, again, you don't want to take this with the knight. You want to take it with the bishop. Now if they do take it back with the pawn, d5 is very crucial to prevent the opponent's pawn from advancing to the center. And then next you're going to castle. If in this position they do push the pawn to d5, you want to move your bishop to f6. This is very important. If they do take your knight with this pawn, you want to take it with the b pawn so that we can again attack the center with d5. Okay, and make sure to castle, because the main ideas in these kind of traps is that your king is going to be open. If you guys enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions, you can leave a comment below. We also have a club page in the comment section. You can join our chess.com club page. And I'll see you guys in the next one.